get us started. Shuffling paper, but I don't really need much preparation to introduce our speaker today. We're really lucky to have Professor Effy Vayena with us today. Effy and I know each other for a really long time. I won't maybe say the dates because that isn't nice, but we met first while Effy was finishing her PhD work at the University of Minnesota. And I arrived there just as they were finishing there in 1990-something. Subsequently, Effy went to Zurich to do, I think that's a postdoc in what we would call, postdoc you'd call habilitation, at the University of Zurich. And Effy and I then reunited after a fashion. I did a sabbatical at the University of Zurich in 2009 when Effy had already joined the faculty there. She worked at the WHO from 2000 to 2007, if I remember correctly. She was at the University of Zurich for 10 years after that, and since 2017 has been the chair in bioethics at the ETH, as it's known, which is the Swiss Federal Institute of Technology, sort of the MIT of Europe. So a very famous university across the world and certainly in Europe, and the first chair in bioethics there, so a real testament to Effy's work. I think you went there funded by the Swiss National Science Foundation, if I recall, on an award from them. So Effy's work, as you'll hear today, is really on some of the cutting-edge areas of bioethics, including, as you'll hear today, advancing digital health information and how to think about that ethics and policy issues that arise in that context and more importantly, what to do about them. So Effy will share with us some of her work on creating a framework for answering those questions. I should say one more thing, that Effy and I are now co-principal investigators on a new project whereby we're helping to build bioethics capacity and expertise in Greece, funded by the Stavros Narcos Foundation, which is probably not a strange name to those of you who know about the Berman Institute. That's important to say because Effy is originally Greek. She's lived in Switzerland for now a long time, but I guess she can say herself her heart and maybe certainly her homeland is Greece. And so we're really happy to be working together on that project with numerous of our Berman Institute faculty. I'm starting to teach there this summer. So with that, I'll stop talking and stop introducing you and say, please join me in welcoming Effy here to Johns Hopkins.
Well, thank you, Jeff. It's such a great pleasure for me to be here. I'm a huge fan of this place and of this institute. A lot of the great scholarship that comes out of here, and of course I'm happy to be visiting also friends like Jeff. As he said, we've known each other for a long time. Jeff skipped one little anecdote in our relationship. When I joined WHO, after I finished my PhD in Minneapolis, I had to work on assisted reproductive technologies, so I landed there. It's a great place, it's a big place, and one of my first things was to email Jeff and say, Jeff, I need some help here. And Jeff writes back with an email that was about maybe 10 pages long, with everything that one needed to know in order to start working on the topic. And he signed it off by saying, that might be more than what we bargained on for, but here it is. So he's been a great, great supporter and friend, and I'm delighted that we now have the new endeavor with the funding for the Greek project. So with all that, thank you again for having me. I'm going to talk to you about some work that I've been doing for the last few years in the so-called space, to use the trendy word, of digital health. And just so we're all on the same page, what do we understand as digital health has a bit of a variation. So the FDA seems to think that digital health has a broad scope. It includes what we still call mobile health, health information technology, wearables that I'm sure all of us are wearing, telehealth, telemedicine, and personalized medicine, something that we've come to call now mostly precision medicine. The Lancet has just launched a new journal, the journal Lancet Digital Health. So I looked at that definition. They consider digital health to be digital technology that is in clinical medicine, public health, and global health. And then one of the people who've been talking a lot about all these digital health issues is Paul Senior, a writer and the person who popularized the term. And he speaks of that as the convergence of the digital and genomic revolutions, again, with healthcare, living, and society. So you can pick and choose, which piece makes the best definition. But as you see, it is not utterly precise, but it is something that has to do with that of course, is based on data. Last March, the World Health Organization announced a number of reforms. Interestingly enough, one of those reforms includes digital health, and specifically the establishment of a new department. WHO did not have a department of digital health, although they did a lot of things on mHealth, eHealth, information technology, etc. And it's interesting to see how they phrase this establishment of the new department as the opportunity for or the need that WHO has to support countries to assess, integrate, regulate, and maximize the opportunities of those digital technologies and artificial intelligence, which of course automatically comes into play through the department. And that follows a resolution that passed last year in the World Health Assembly on digital health, again in the spirit of supporting countries to use these new technologies to improve the health of the populations. Now, all of this digital health discussion is based on data. It's important to, of course, remember that. It's about the possibility we have to capture, to store, to analyze new data. And one of the ideas that we've been trying to put forward in also understanding why we have such a plethora of ethical challenges in the context of data is the idea of understanding the health data as an ecosystem. I did some work with colleagues at WHO, and I'll show you this graph. You might have seen it, but I'll explain it. What we used to have as data sources, we call standard sources, data that came from public health, from research, from health services, and are the usual suspects we used to collect and store. But the interesting thing over the last years is that we have those expanded sources, data that come from through different technologies, from different aspects of life and aspects of health. And that's important because for these expanded sources, here we go, we have new capabilities. So the combination of our standard sources, of expanded sources, and there I would include things we collect from our behavior, because of our new capabilities, we are able to produce new knowledge and more information. I'll cut the pie here and show you a couple of other things and how this is, what I mean by that. The top graph or figure shows, you probably cannot read it, but it's a list of nature components and sensors that one could use to collect data. That's from 2015, so I'm sure if we would publish the same picture today, it would be so full that we couldn't see the human in the picture. And the idea behind that was put, I think, quite interestingly on this article in Nature Biotech by Dennis also Arcelo, who wrote that the patient is an enormous repository of information that we need to harvest, of course, for clinical care, but in discovery as well. A few years later, that's from a publication in The Lancet about using that idea, that model, in case of maternal health. And here is a call for a digital tool set. For example, a pregnant woman could have the phone, could have all these apps, could send information, could receive information, could have tests. And the idea here is with all this technology, we can improve the health of maternal health, we can reduce complications, and always when people talk about digital health, there is the sense that there's going to be some form of cost containment or cost effectiveness. So we'll come up about this later. Now, as I was scrolling through my Twitter feed the other day, I saw this picture. And as you can see, it is again about somebody being observed by all these people in order to give him or him, in this case, a better customer experience. And I was thinking, I was flipping between those pictures, that picture and that picture. And they seem to have something in common, right? What struck me in this one, which is not about medicine, is the similarity with what we are actually discussing in our health context. The idea that we can capture so much in order to give people better health. And I'd like to ask you to keep that thought for a moment, because I do think that it links what happens in health and the way we understand the challenges in health and what happens, I guess, in most aspects of digitalization today. So back to the pie, which brings me actually to the last base of this pie, which is the stakeholders. And what we have in the digital world is we have an increased number of stakeholders that are very relevant for what happens in the sources and in our capabilities. Now, we present this idea as an evolving system. That is not set. These are some categories, and we imagine that it just grows and expands. Now, the other interesting thing that happens is not only do we have new actors here as stakeholders, we also have new roles of existing actors and new combinations and new constellations. An example here, for example, that is from the Facebook's website, how Facebook AI helps suicide prevention. Facebook analyzes posts, you can see it classifies text, then goes and sends this through as a process that eventually, I read the page, through some review, it can then send a notification to the person who seems to be at risk, or in some cases even send a note to the law enforcement. And I thought that New York article captured precisely what I was trying to capture with my graph, that new actors play new roles. In particular here, the tricky public health role. So all of this to say that we have a series of new challenges that we need to deal with, and to some extent I think we do have the normative work there to help us address them, and in some others the question could be how we can apply them and what kind of processes we need to have in place in order to address them sufficiently. There are at least 3 features in this ecosystem approach, provided you agree with the fact that that is an ecosystem, that I think relate to the kinds of questions we're getting or the kind of ethical challenges we need to deal with. One is the uncertainty we have in terms of data and their uses. Some of the questions, this is not an exhaustive list, just some of the questions we have to deal with. For example, what's the real purpose of data collection? If you recall the Facebook story, the real purpose of data collection in this case is not to prevent suicide. This is something that comes after the initial collection. What else are they used for? Who is using the data and why? Who controls those uses? There is the perennial question of who owns the data. I don't think it's a great question, but it's a question that a lot of people have in mind in most places. I go to at least. And who oversees all these activity? There's another cluster of issues, I think, around the idea of temporality, and that is about the fact that we can use data have a very, very long life cycle. They can be used for a very long time, forever, perhaps infinitely. But there's another sense of temporality that I think causes trouble or challenges. These analytics we have use a lot of the past to determine the present and predict the future. And in that situation, I think, again, we have new kinds of classifications and new kinds of determinations that may pose questions around our agency, our control, and autonomy. And the last issue that, again, I found, or the last feature of the ecosystem that I think raises also distinct kinds of questions is this idea of, perhaps, of relationality. You automatically are classified or grouped according to certain criteria, perhaps with or without knowing why you've been classified as such. in many cases, even if you never agreed to share data about yourself. But you are in that group. And so if at least these three features raise a host of questions, some of those have seen the light of day and have been discussed in the world we live in very quickly. They are all over the news and all over the place. I'm sure those of you thinking about data have heard of the care.data scandal, if I may say, in the United Kingdom, where the initially good idea of using general practitioners' data for purposes of research and better and quality improvement had to stop because of the way it was presented and handled to the people. People wanted to opt out, and eventually an investigation and review, the Caldecott review that followed, showed that there were a number of problems in the way it was done. Numbers of transparency, problems of transparency, of communication, etc. Now, this idea of care data died, but it has come back in a new form and hopefully in a better prepared and organized one. You might know less about the other picture here, which is an agreement that the Italian government struck with IBM to give it about 61 million health records of its citizens. Now, that's interesting because it wasn't very popular in the international press, but this agreement between the government and one company raised the concerns of the Data Protection Authority in Italy and the concerns of the fair competition officers in the same country. We don't know the outcome yet, but this is something that finding is very interesting, that people felt that there's issues of that nature. Europe is not having exclusive rights on these problems. I think we had here cases a few months ago with the Sloan Kettering's access to data in the startup upline AI and have exclusive access to this data. And something that again keeps popping up everywhere, whether those mental health apps that we may use or other health apps actually share data without our knowledge. We conducted a review that we're still in the process of completing at the moment, looking at some of this literature, and it's quite astonishing to see how far the problems that we find being identified in terms of privacy protections and others in the health apps that are not considered medical devices. So, a number of issues that come here have to do with consent and what people agree to, how the privacy is protected, whether they participate or not in decisions that are made about themselves, whether something like electronic health records with a lot of information can be considered a public good in a system that's being funded, for example, by the state or not, who can have exclusive access to those things or not. How is the benefit going to be shared, the benefit that we believe is going to be extracted from access to this data? And other questions around ethics review of projects that involve the use of data in this context. So this list again is not exhaustive. The examples before can relate to one or several of those. And for the most part, I don't think we have it resolved. But we do talk a lot about them being a problem. This is busy, but it tells you that a lot of people are thinking we have a problem and we have to address somehow. The blue are guidelines that various organizations have produced in order to address the health data and AI-related challenges. The black are more general ethics of data guidance that could apply to the use of health data. The UK, you'll see, is quite busy with these kinds of guidance documents. One that just came out, is quite interesting, I think, is the Code of Conduct for Data-Driven Health and Care Technology. And it specifically tries to produces Code of Conduct to address those people who are going to be using NHS data for these kinds of purposes, research in particular, and who have to do that in collaboration with the private sector. Because that's another sticky point. How you do this kind of research with a number of companies that have the know-how and can actually advance the field. As you can see here in the US, of course, I'm sure you're familiar with that part, the FDA has a number of activities in the space, is producing, it has the pre-certification program, and it recently has put out another framework which is open for comments. International organizations are also trying to give guidance, OECD in particular, and the UNESCO. But again, as you see also from the year that this guidance has come out, of course you can go back and look for some others, but these are the newest one, and they're over the last couple of years. Because we've been talking about these issues coming, and some organizations have just tried to address them. Now, I don't think that any of those producers gives us the recipe for how to solve the issues, but I think several of those at least give us some broader guidance. Just last week, I think last week, a couple of days ago, in the New England Journal of Medicine, Effy Vayena and some colleagues called for a new Bellman report, a Bellman report for health data, addressing more or less the problem. We have all this data, we're going to use them, but right now we don't have a good way of sorting out how to do it responsibly and correctly. This article is mostly about the US regulatory context. In Europe, we just last May, we introduced the European Data Protection Regulation, the GDPR in short. It affects the US a little bit, but of course we are the primary recipients and implementers. And at least that regulation is trying to set some parameters around what can be done with the data. And that applies to health data, of course, as well. In this case, here, the regulatory framework is different. According to this article, it leaves a lot of room for practices that do not meet ethical requirements. And what the conclusion of the article was that perhaps we need to go back, we need a more meaningful ethics review to address some of these questions. So I think the meaningful review is something we need anyway. I'm wondering whether actually putting it all into one review body is going to do the job that we want to be done. So for some time, thinking also along these lines, myself and the colleagues that I have in Zurich have been thinking, how can we address that more efficiently? It's not that we don't have ethics review. In most jurisdictions, some of this activity, the research activity, will go through ethics review. In some places, we have other instruments like data access review, so additional or complementary to review. In some other places, we have regulatory bodies like the data protection officers who will tell you about the strict regulatory protection. So I think we do have a lot of different instruments and a lot of different modalities around this. So how is it that things happen and escape through the system of oversight? So the idea we proposed, and this is an idea we're working on, so I'm grateful for feedback from you because we're kind of trying to advance it, is that if we understand the health data as an ecosystem, again, with the new sources, with the new analytics, with the expanded stakeholders in the place, perhaps the better way to think of oversight is as addressing a system, and therefore trying to put the different pieces under one framework. So this is not about rediscovering ethics review or introducing for ethics review new principles. It's about a form of alignment in what we could call the sort of oversight pipeline. There might be a need for additional modalities, but there just might be a better way of organizing according to some features. And I'll talk to you, I'll discuss those features. So if the problems we have or the challenges come from the uncertainty, this idea of temporality and relationality, what we thought could be useful is to introduce these features of oversight that can help us meet the, can help us address some of the challenges. These are the 4 features: adaptivity, flexibility, inclusiveness and reflexivity, responsiveness and model. I'll talk about each of those and how to understand them. Now, when we wrote that paper on systemic oversight, we just introduced the features, but it didn't, I didn't realize that they can actually, if they put in the right order, they create an acronym, which occurred to me last Christmas when I was working on another paper about those features. So it is the AFER system, but that's a coincidence. It was never intended to be so. So the adaptivity and flexibility, I think the problem, perhaps a problem with the oversight mechanisms is that they don't quickly adapt to the data, to the new data types. We're used to have more convenient categories of data. Certain things apply for some categories, other things don't apply. The issue in this new world of activity is that data change categories all the time. Data that are just your shopping carts can become health data because of the way they will be analyzed and used. And you cannot exclude them just because they have been classified under a different category. Data that have been anonymous can become identifiable. And we know that there are decisions that can happen anytime with a new analytics. So because they are outside the purview even of data protection law at some point, that doesn't mean that they will always be there. And so the idea that our oversight is so flexible as to accommodate that constant movement, I think is something we need to think more carefully about. Adapt, therefore, and be flexible. This is a paper that, again, I found quite exciting as a possibility, but quite as gave me a headache in terms of how one would go about it. The paper spoke about digital biomarkers. So forget those biomarkers you used to have in the lab. These are the digital biomarkers. So based on all of these things that you collect from the sensors, for example, how many spelling errors you're doing when you're typing a message, or how forcefully we push on your touch screen, and all sorts of things that we typically don't associate with any, at least mild version of disease onset. All of these things can be used to construct those digital biomarkers. And so it's interesting to see, again, our mindset moving away from the lab and the biosamples to a system which consists of these kinds of information that will be collected through all sorts of different technology, and not necessarily always because you ask for them to be collected. Because in a system that gives you digital biomarkers, you don't have to go to the doctor and say, can I please have my digital biomarkers? You can wear them on your phone, or you can walk around with them. So that's the idea of having all sorts of data, changing categories very frequently. The other feature that I think an oversight pipeline needs is this idea of inclusiveness, something we again talked about in the past when we were thinking about when we were constructing ethics review committees, or in other forms of research when we're looking at how to include a variety of voices. Again, we're not exactly have done great progress here, but I think here is much more important. The UK had a very interesting, the Academy of Medical Sciences last fall came out with a very interesting report in how we're going to include patients and people in partnerships when we are speaking of the data-driven future of healthcare. And one of those, it was not just about asking people, understanding their needs, but it was about involving people in the public in the co-development. Now, that is aspirational, that's important, but again, we have not done, I can't think of having great progress with that. Interestingly enough, when I looked at the code of conduct that the UK produced for the use of data, their requirement there, their principle is not make people co-producers. Their requirement there is study people's needs, which I understand is to be very different in terms of what we want to achieve. So that, I think the way to include is something that it will be very important. something easy, and it's something that we need to think very carefully about. The other feature that we included here is that of reflexivity, reflecting those classificatory practices as they emerge in this data-driven research. Even when we have ethics review, the kind of reflexivity that's required, I think, is really important and needs to be stressed again. I'm thinking of this example, again, perhaps familiar to you, the one that looked at, used AI to, deep neural networks to tell us that some human, we can detect sexual orientation from facial images. And that study, of course, had passed ethics review and was published eventually, and created a lot of interesting debate as to what are the issues that need to be thought through when we have these kinds of activities and this kind of research. Where is the new knowledge? What is its purpose? What are the risks that it generates when it gets done? So this kind of reflexivity, which seemed to me, at least in this case, to be lacking, it's something we need to see included in a system. And responsiveness is something that I think we have to be able to introduce in the system much more effectively because of the scale and the density, perhaps, of the events we'll have to contain. Privacy breaches are one thing that I think is common on both sides of the Atlantic. What we've seen now in Europe is an increase in reporting of data breaches since GDPR was implemented, came into effect. The question is how one will respond to this. One thing is to respond by giving fines to the companies who breach or those who breach, but the further question is what other necessary measures of response are required for those who have been harmed. Again, this is only from April 12. We don't have to search back a long time. Just look back on the last month and we'll see lots of those things. NHS, these are data from personal data on new mothers and babies sold to third parties. It said sold to multiple customers, in some cases up to 17 times. So, of course, you can ask the question here, so what's the harm to these people, other than that the data being sold to advertisers? But I don't think we can always think that there will be very mild kind of harms when things are happening in this way. And the final point is that of monitoring. Monitoring is incredibly important, and not in the oversight pipeline. We do not have a body that is exclusively tasked with this kind of activity. Now, in the situation where things change so frequently, I think monitor is becoming much more important. In GDPR, there is actually a relevant reference to monitoring. There is because there is always the risk of data changing status from non-identifiable, for example, to identifiable. But I think monitoring, given the possibilities that we cannot necessarily predict, has to become, again, much more, to be a serious feature of this response we have. I've been writing and thinking recently about return of results to research participants. Something that I personally have been advocating along with many colleagues, and I've been thinking about it in the context of return of results that become part of one's medical record and then have effects on one's ability to obtain life insurance. That is not just a US phenomenon. Life insurance, for example, in Switzerland, we have a ceiling of 400,000 francs. If you go over that, one could ask the insurance can decline a policy on the basis of certain information. So the idea, so that situation where results or information that comes in from research projects, from different activities in relation to data, I think they need to have constant monitoring as to what kind of effects they might be generating. So this idea, again, is a suggestion of features that our oversight needs to have in order, I think, to accommodate the kind of challenges we're facing. It is not about new normative principles. I understand them more as features that I think they give us maybe the connective tissue between what we're already doing between our different committees and reviews and bodies, and provide some form of alignment. That said, again, I think we might need to have different process. We might need to have different order in our process of oversight and different fora. But I think, or what we've been trying to argue is, at the moment we seem to just be putting our systems as they used to work for our analog world and ask them to do the job for our digital world. So hopefully these features force us to think about this different kind of approach. Now, we've been working on another paper to think of how this could be implemented. We haven't completed that work yet, but we hope to offer the sort of next step to the futures. And another direction of our work at the moment is to see whether that kind of approach could be helpful, not simply in the research environment, but more broadly beyond the, strictly speaking, research context. We started from there. That's the context I've been working on for a long time, the one that I'm more familiar with. But I think some of these ideas might be useful and expanded and can be extended to beyond the research. So that's it. I'd like to thank you very much for where I am and where I live. I don't have this view, but that's Zurich, and that is my institution here.
Famous for many things besides the view, in addition to the view. Okay, so we have time for questions and comments. And wait for the microphone so we can capture you on the tape.
Hi, Angie Boyce, research fellow at the Berger Institute. So you mentioned that you think that ownership of data is the wrong question to be asking. So I want to know more about how you would reframe that question, or questions you actually think we ought to be asking.
Great, thank you. So the idea of ownership, I think when people talk about ownership, they think of it as applying property rights on data. And I find this understanding very difficult because unlike property and physical items that we have, data are something that you can copy and they use at the same time. Multiple users could be using the same copy. They can transfer them. They can issue perhaps license to somebody to use them, but they don't have to necessarily exclusively own them. So I don't find it useful. The property idea I don't find useful. I think it restricts things we can do with data unnecessarily. I'm thinking more of the framing as who controls the access. I think so far at least I found this question more helpful. Because if you control it, you have control, or another way to think about it is as a steward of this data, which protects their users again, but does not alienate it in the sense that you could alienate another set. I think it restricts the unnecessarily what we can do with it. So that's why I'm not very, very happy with the property right model on the data.
I'm Andrew Simon at the Berger Institute. Thank you for this really interesting talk. Kind of scared to about the needs for oversight. As I'm sure you know, our HIPAA law has a huge exception for law enforcement. And you don't have to think too hard to see some of the potential problems
nobody else does. The oversight could work in this case, and with the understanding that law enforcement has those privileges, before and after, in that sense, that in terms of how, what knowledge people have of information flow, which right now they don't necessarily have. So that would be one part in the pipeline of oversight that could, we would have that could help with what happens with law enforcement. The second, I think, is the monitoring part. For example, often, unless you are arrested, you don't know that law enforcement has been searching through your data. And I'm not talking about those cases where there is a legal basis for certain actions, or the rest of people whose data have been looked at for without the appropriate measures. And again, so the monitoring part will help there, and the responsiveness. What do you do? What is a way to respond to people who have been perhaps unnecessarily or searched through in terms of data? The question with law enforcement would be, where is this applied, right? Is it in the research context, in an institution that conducts research? Is it with Facebook and private entities that have different arrangements? Where is it? But I think irrespective of where you are, if we did have the kind of oversight that had those features, maybe we would have a more at least honest and transparent situation between those of us whose data have been accessed and what's happening. It's not a perfect solution. I don't think it can become perfect. I'm talking more about an imperfect solution to a very difficult problem. Does this answer?
Okay. It's a hard question, I agree.
Is it working? I'm not sure this is working, Alan. But, so maybe while we wait for, oh, there it goes. All right. So before Joe asks his question, to me, one of the follow-ons to Len's point is there's all sorts of data that doesn't really count as digital health information that law enforcement is now accessing, combined with health information. So part of the challenge of systemic oversight is that there are sources from all over, very disparate categories. And there was just a piece, I think it was in the Times last week, about Google and face recognition technology and access by law enforcement for all the things that Len is worried about, rightfully. So it feels to me like this is kind of explosively growing, and it's not really health only, not by a long shot. And what to say about that, I don't know, maybe it's an observation more than a question.
That's why I thought when I saw this cartoon there with the, being observed, everybody, I think, tells you, including the law enforcement, that if we observe everything about you and capture everything about you, we'll offer a better product. Be it health, be it security, be it customer satisfaction, education, whatever. So it seems that a better product is predicated on you being utterly transparent about everything. And without having a lot of say into how people get to that better product about you, either that being the better health, or the better education, or the better security, or the better law enforcement. So this is the piece that I think that is actually generic to everything we do in this digital space, and not specifically to health. And this is what puzzles me when I put these pictures next to each other, because we do treat health in a particular specific way, and we believe we've made progress in what applies and which principles or what systems we have to do this responsibly. And I fear that with this explosion, what we do in health and what we thought we have been doing properly, it's just, it might not hold at this point.
Thanks very much. This is probably somewhat related, but I wanted to go back to maybe the solution or the approach and sort of what kinds of features would be helpful to practice, guide practice. And it seems like there's a role still, it seems like you're saying, that there's a role still for these sort of trusted intermediaries, right? That there's, that you have some kind of data privacy officer, someone that system is so diverse that you can imagine there being just sort of a large diversity in types of intermediaries and different data sets and different data uses. And the transparency is very helpful to those intermediaries. I'm not sure how helpful it is to everyday folks like us, but who don't really understand the implications of the data sets and the findings and things. But I'm thinking of, like, in a clinical context, you have a clinician, right? And the FDA regulations, the draft guidance says something. I think one of the key points is that the information has to be conveyed to that clinician or whoever it might be in a way that they can understand it and confirm, right, whether or not their independent clinical judgment coincides with whatever that, that algorithm is producing. And so that, to me, seems like a really clear example of a functional, trusted intermediary in a system, within a closed system of health, in health context, where that may be a good model or example to look at for other types of uses and contexts, and sort of thinking maybe about what your thoughts are, whether we have similar things in other contexts. And IRB isn't always perfect, right? And I was on an email this morning with someone about who does human rights research. It says, when we do these investigations, the IRB sometimes is working against us. Right? So it's sort of how do you use data in a way that I'm sure that has that sort of trusted.
So the idea of trust intermediaries, I think, is very good. That's what seems at least to be the most hopeful solution at the moment. But they take many different forms, right? In the clinical setting, you have the clinician, and in the platforms, you have a data access body or a data ethics body, because it's not about any individual, whether you're supposed to be doing any, to be developing any particular technology, a particular algorithm. In the data protection, you have something that's called DPO, the Data Protection Officer. So that looks specifically about compliance, whether, at least in Europe, whether you comply with data protection regulation, which sets the bigger parameters around what you're doing. So there are different, I think, bodies and individuals put in place to play that role. My worry a little bit is not about the value of these roles. I think they're valuable. Is how they are, whether they leave gaps anyway. And I'm thinking more that's the problem. An ethics review committee, okay, we know it is not perfect, but it plays an important role. And we've been running a study with the ethics review committees on and how they deal with big data projects. For example, one issue they're raising is that they don't have expertise. Because the way they were constituted was very different from what the needs now are for these projects. But they are there, they have institutional memory, they have a set of principles and guidance that they're taking the proposals against. So they're doing an important, I think, job. So there are many different ones. Again, I think they're important. I'm not sure their constellation is arranged in a way that can help us, can help with with the entirety of the issues. So therefore, the idea is not so much about inventing a new ethics review committee, but rather looking at this pipeline of various trusted intermediaries with such roles and see how they can be aligned.
Hi, Deborah Matthews, Bergman Institute faculty. Thank you so much. I'm also interested in the gaps, right? I mean, to follow on Joe used the phrase closed system, and Len talked about HIPAA and this big exception for law enforcement, but there's also, I mean, HIPAA only applies to covered entities.
Yeah.
As soon as those data are outside the covered entity, all bets are off, right? And the data are coming from, as Jeff said, from so many different sources, and the power is often in the aggregation of data from multiple different places and different data streams coming in. So perhaps, I mean, the US doesn't have anything like GDPR. So perhaps this is less of a problem in the EU, but managing all of those different streams of information and figuring out when, to use a Ghostbusters phrase, the crossing of the streams causes the problem, because there aren't closed systems. I mean,
So well, has GDPR, and the European approach to data protection is that personal data are one thing. It doesn't matter whether they're health or finance or whatever, it's personal data. So we treat, the law applies as such. In the US, you have the sectorial approach. So at least we got that part. There is an important exemption in the GDPR for research, for statistical purposes in public health. And many of us celebrate the fact that there were such exemptions, otherwise a lot of the things that we want to be done, it couldn't be done. So if you look carefully at those exemptions, you can do a lot of things in there. So it's actually a lot of space using the statistical processing, the research exemption. So even with the GDPR, I think we are better off in that respect, we still have gaps. And so I don't think we're entirely off the hook just because we have the regulatory parameters. GDPR also treats research as a separate category because, according to it, research has its own ethical standards and safeguards. So, for example, GDPR says that understands consent as a legal basis for processing data in general, but in research, you can have another legal basis. Because research has consent as a safeguard, not as a legal basis for processing. So there's a lot of space in there where I think it's the right reading. The question is, where does it leave us in the context of work discuss? So we do have gaps. And I think that's the problem. The problem is that there are suddenly too many places that need to be covered. I think we were in a much better place when we had a closed system of research, which we don't have now. So again, the idea of the systemic approach comes precisely from the need to see, is there any way to address those multiple pieces that are all over the place? And I haven't thought as to, is there an overarching, body which says these are the features, you all have to do it this way. I've got there. I'm just working from the idea that if we had all of these places at the same time, maybe a system that connects them could bring us closer to more responsible use. But this is, I think, the biggest problem, the multiple places that at the end, though, have an impact on groups and individuals.
Hello, over here. Hi, I may be the one clinician in the room, so I am doing big data. You're at a school of medicine, so we collect 6 billion data points per patient. I always worry about oversight because it interferes with my experiment, quite honestly, and my ethicist knows this. Mainly because you want the freedom, especially in a medical center. I can't speak for a commercial application you're talking about. In a medical center, you're doing an experiment. And big data is an experiment in all medicine today. We don't know what those outcomes are going to be. We need the flexibility to do what we need when we need. Now, if we consent patients properly, we consent for full use, both commercial and academic, because we're not necessarily the smartest people in the world to analyze that data. You want everyone to be able to analyze. So I worry then about oversight restricting that possibility.
Well, we don't want to restrict the possibility, but I think what we're worried about, for example, is whether we have the right conditions for this access that you're talking about, including the access of having those with the better know-how, like the tech companies, are much better, because that's their business, right? They do it well. Accessing data in ways that perhaps exclude others, and essentially they're not delivering what you're after. So
There's something there, though, because you said that a couple times like that. How do I know? When you're at the cutting edge of doing new experiments, I don't know what's the right way. I mean, I have a set way that we have in academics, but a company might do it. Another country might do it differently. Why not leave that open? I mean, there's the usual today is, yes, it's typical. You don't try to figure out what the patient is, quite frankly. Once you get the data out, you can never stop them from doing anything anyway. All you do is ask them to agree not to do that. But beyond that, why not allow complete flexibility?
So I wasn't talking about not allowing complete flexibility. What I think I have a problem with is complete exclusivity. I'm worried about a data set that is given exclusively, for example, to a particular great player who can do a great job, and that leaves other players out because they cannot exclude it, because you have
Open access is important.
Well, yeah, or at least lack of this kind of exclusivity. And what we are seeing is more and more of these exclusive contracts. So a particular company with the excellent know-how, maybe they're going to do the right thing, I don't know, technologically speaking, but then they become the ones who have this advantage. And I think there I'm a bit more concerned. If you do this, the question is who reviews the conditions of these agreements?
That's what I was getting to. So are these kinds of approaches being linked up to, again, within the School of Medicine, IRBs? Because I can tell you with the project I run, which is a big project, IRB had nothing to do with this element of it. Maybe they're not up to speed to deal with that. Would have been another thing we're going to check off, but I agree, actually, those are important issues.
Yeah. So this is, so that's more of my worry. At least this came up quite a bit in the UK. NHS and DeepMind, they had this agreement because DeepMind has or still has excellent technology, and they could access a lot of hospital electronic health records to develop an algorithm that would be very useful for NHS. This is something that, again, once it was investigated by the Information Commissioner Office, we found it had a lot of problems with the contract in terms of how patients were consented, in terms of what you're allowed to do, et cetera, et cetera. And I think this is an example of those problematic kinds of agreements that maybe they guarantee you that the freedom to have a great player doing excellent technology, but can they guarantee you that the benefit will be shared the right way, fairly? And so that's more how my worry comes in. So it's not about not having them, it's about what are the conditions that we agree are the right conditions